Without change, something sleeps inside us. The sleeper must awaken.
Hello and welcome back to another We Ourselves video. And today I want to talk about reparations, the R word, but not the usual discussion of reparations. I want to talk about it in terms of the need for us, ADOS, FBA, Black Americans, to have our own independent and well-financed Black media. The only way to repair the historic damage done to our community through the media is with true reparative justice. In other words, reparations. When you look at the recast T'Challa issue, the lack of good Black representation in genre media overall, as well as the NAACP's report on the detrimental effects that current media offerings have on Black Americans, it's clear that we need our own independent Black media. Not a Black Hollywood, but a truly Black-owned, operated, distributed media, top to bottom, start to finish. Because in this scenario, we wouldn't have to worry about convincing media corporations that we, Black Americans, ADOS, FBA, we need better representation. I want to talk about a report on normalizing reparations for Black Americans because, believe it or not, America has a long history of paying reparations to harmed individuals and groups. Let's begin with a quote from Kevin Grievous, actor, writer, director, and president of Channel 56 Films and Dark Storm Comics. This quote is taken from his interview with Rich of Black Comet Lords, and I feel their entire discussion nicely frames the need for true independent Black media.
We as Black men, or even Black women too, just as Blacks period, we are not really in control of our own images. And so if we're not in control of our own images, how much influence can we actually have? Even if they give us a job, they still belong to quote unquote them. And if you think about it, all the Black superheroes we know and love, they were created by white guys.
I love that quote because it is the essence of what I believe and why I do what I do, because I believe we need to write our own characters. More importantly, as Kevin says, we need to own them. Given the history of the United States and how we've been locked out of the Capitol and the means to effectively control and distribute our own images, the only way to really correct this is through forms of reparations, to correct the centuries of locking us out of the process. Yes, I know today's technology and social media platforms are available. There are a lot of original, very talented Black creators who have earned millions of dollars and have millions of followers. But the problem there is we don't own those means of distribution. Those platforms are owned by people who rarely, if ever, look like us. And at a moment's notice, those creators, no matter how big, can lose their entire platforms.
And I'm learning about algorithm and all this other stuff because they took my last account. They took it away from me. I was at 800,000, approaching 1 million. They took it away from me. All that hard work, took it away.
American media corporations have shown consistently that when it comes to Black Americans and our images, they will always choose control over money. And that's why I want to talk about reparations from the point of view of Black creators and what establishing a true Black media structure can do for us. And so as I begin, I just want to give a shout out to Yvette Carnell of Breaking Brown and the ADOS Foundation, of which I'm a member, because she actually did a video on this very subject, highlighting this report and Americans' history with reparations. And I'm going to cover the same report, which was done by the Russell Sage Foundation. And it's entitled, Normalizing Reparations, U.S. Precedents, Norms, and Models for Compensating Harms, and the Implication for Reparations to Black Americans. And what this report does, in short, it goes in and shows that Black Americans have always been harmed as a group, and therefore the United States shouldn't have a problem with paying reparations because they are actually really good at doing that. And I'm going to go through some of the examples that are cited in this report. And the first quote that I want to use from the report is this: reparations are a surprisingly commonplace practice in the federal government's role of compensating harms. The United States has paid many forms of reparations throughout its history and has implemented hundreds of programs that compensate individuals for their and their dependents for various harms. And again, when we talk about this, a lot of people immediately focus in on the Japanese Americans, but this report goes way beyond that. And I also think it's interesting that a lot of these programs are probably the very things that are currently being dismantled right now, which means that Republicans who voted for the current administration and who benefited from some of these programs are being cut out of them. And you can just look at all the videos that have appeared on YouTube and on all the social media platforms where people are crying and complaining about this very thing. But we're going to see that one of the biggest groups that got reparations in this form were veterans. But we'll get to that later. Anyway, the report continues. The discussion of paying reparations to Black Americans frequently invokes the comparisons of reparations paid to victims of the Holocaust and payments to Japanese Americans incarcerated in internment camps during World War II. And again, that's what I just mentioned. And that's what most people normally focus on. And by the way, the term that is used by the U.S. government itself is reparatory compensation, i.e. money. So I wonder why, when it comes to us, Black Americans, our so-called supporters of reparations for us always want to focus in on non-cash payments. And we've even seen that in the recent California reparations bill. But back to the report. U.S. laws and rules governing compensation programs show that the Congress has long sought to provide some measure of restitution, compensation, and rehabilitation to those who have suffered harms that are largely beyond their controls. The United States has largely focused in on compensation. Compensation, folks, money, a check. Continuing, the Congress has established these programs to compensate or assist victims for certain circumstances, including negligence, terrorism, market fluctuation, personal injuries, trade policy, corporate bankruptcies, acts of God, such as crop failures, environmental disasters, as well as paying reparatory compensation. Remember those two words, reparatory compensation, as redress for racial harms, and 2 laws enacted for compensation to World War II incarcerated Japanese Americans. What this report is doing is showing that America has a long history of giving reparations, even in terms of racial harms, as a justification for saying there's no logical reason to deny the very same thing to Black Americans. And continuing, the programmatic scope, financial scale, and the number of harms address the diversity of victims compensated, again, money, and long existing compensatory mechanisms demonstrate that the United States government not only is capable of administering programs of reparatory compensation, again, money, but the United States government is experienced in doing so. And I want to say here that the current dismantling of the federal government, I believe, is partially to dismantle these very mechanisms because they know the day of reckoning is coming. They know there's going to ultimately be justice and reparations for Black Americans. So they are trying right now to put that off by dismantling the mechanisms by which it would be done.